Even though we just narrowly averted a government shutdown, I fear that many among the public and the press are going to give praise to allegedly moderate Republicans for their last-second surrender. But as we've discussed on this channel multiple times, it's simply a fact there is no such thing as a moderate Republican politician in the U.S. Congress. And to reiterate that point, I'm going to refer you to the recent words of two very different U.S. Congresswomen. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. Maybe check out my Patreon. I'd appreciate the support. All right, so the first one up is Nancy Mace, the Republican Congresswoman from South Carolina, and a frequent subject of this channel because she is one of the worst people in Congress. Precisely because, or in part because, she's so good at presenting herself as a reasonable, moderate, affable Republican. She's been on CNN multiple times, MSNBC, ABC, CBS. She's even been on The View, and we're going to play that clip at the very end. But this was Nancy Mace at the first formal impeachment inquiry hearing into President Biden just a few days ago. You tell me if these are the words of a moderate.
We already know the president took bribes from Burisma. I also want to add, betraying your country is treason.
Those don't sound very moderate to me. That sounds like a sitting congressperson accusing the sitting president of committing treason and receiving bribes or participating in bribes from a foreign energy company, Burisma, at which his son, Hunter Biden, was employed. It's a very strong allegation, not moderate at all. So then the question becomes, what did she say a few days after that when asked for specifics by the Fox propaganda network? You tell me if these words are moderate.
Have you been able to identify specific policy decisions that Joe Biden made that he was paid for?
I have not had the ability to research that. I've been looking more at the LLCs, the bank records, all of the lies that Joe Biden has told, and what evidence we have so far in meetings, dinners, appointments, White House records, et cetera, phone messages, text messages, emails, et cetera, connecting the dots with Joe Biden.
So that was a long way of saying no. She doesn't have any evidence whatsoever to support her claim. So for her initial claim, which is that Joe Biden participated in a bribe, it's two parts, right? He would have to receive compensation and do something in exchange for that compensation. It's two parts. Now, she can make vague references to the 12,000 financial documents that the Biden family has turned over to her and, you know, the thousands of suspicious activity reports. But if she had any evidence that, you know, a foreign adversary or a foreign energy company, whatever, you know, paid Joe Biden to do something, that would be compelling evidence. And we haven't seen that, which means they don't have it. But let's say that we grant her the premise because we're super generous here. Then again, the follow-up is, well, what did Biden do in exchange for that money? Because that's essential to prove the claim of a bribe. And she says, well, I don't know. So she baselessly accused the sitting president of the United States as participating in a bribe and committing treason. And then she can't bring the receipts when push comes to shove. That's not the conduct of a moderate. But in case you have any other doubts, Nancy Mace is constantly giving you evidence to doubt her credibility when she claims she's a moderate. This is her appearance on The View. And the most standout question to me came right at the end, in which she was asked about Donald Trump. And you tell me if her answer to this question is the answer a moderate would give.
Now, would you support Trump as the nominee, even if he is a convicted criminal?
Well, if you're a convicted criminal, you can still run for president.
Yeah.
And I will support my party's nominee no matter what happens next year.
There you have it. You explain to me how that's moderate. Imagine if the shoe was on the other foot. Imagine if Nancy Mace were still serving in Congress as a Republican, and either Donald Trump didn't exist or Donald Trump was a completely different person and was not federally indicted. But let's say that somebody in the Democratic field was. Let's say that the Democrats had their own version of Donald Trump, somebody who was running for the presidency and was credibly indicted. Imagine somebody asked Nancy Mace that question, like, hey, Nancy, or Congresswoman Mace, whatever, what do you think of the fact that members of your opposition party may very well appoint somebody who may very well end up being a convicted felon to run for the presidency, and that person may win? What do you think about that? What do you think about the fact that they're going to support him or her no matter what? Do you think Nancy Mace would say, well, folks, I mean, come on. The Constitution doesn't explicitly forbid a convicted felon from running for or indeed even, winning the presidency, so it really doesn't matter. No, of course not. In that counterfactual and that Dr. Strange timeline, she is rightly screaming at the top of her lungs, demanding that the Democratic Party comport themselves to higher standards. But she won't demand that of her own party, like every other deranged Republican. So it's just simply a fact. That's not the answer of a moderate Republican. If you're the party of law and order, the party of Jesus Christ and personal accountability and all the things that the Republican Party claims to be, and you're willing to set that aside for Donald Trump, and you would never grant that concession for the Democratic Party, you're a cultist, and you should be called out as such. The last thing I'll say about Nancy Mace before we play the last clip here is that she voted against the funding legislation for the next 45 days. She voted for a painful government shutdown, which would have forced our Border Patrol agents not to be paid, our soldiers not to be paid, FDA food inspectors not to be paid, TSA officers not to be paid, air traffic controllers not to be paid. Nancy Mace, when push comes to shove, is simply not a moderate, and anyone who pretends otherwise is either ignorant or a liar. And the last clip I want to play comes from Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez because she puts it the best possible way, in my opinion.
Possible iteration of cutting benefits. They tried to cut across the board 30% of the budgets of critical agencies like the Social Security Administration. They voted, some of the most moderate members, quote unquote, moderate members of the Republican Party, casted votes for things like 80% cuts under the Department of Education to low-income schools. This is not a moderate party, period. There are not moderates in the Republican Party. There are just different degrees of fealty to Donald Trump, but it starts with a lot of fealty, and then it goes to extreme fealty.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's it. There is no moderate Republican. There are only those who are crazy and crazier, and that's simply a fact.